set the whole thing up by start to start. You've made the Fugazi record, been on tour, everything happened quite quickly for you at that point. What was your sort of physical and mental state as you went into the writing part of the album again?
It wasn't just that we'd finished the Fugazi record, because we'd actually gone into a situation where we recorded Reel to Reel after that, and Reel to Reel gave us an extension on the touring, and Fugazi had just started to fan the flames across here in mainland Europe, just started to. But when Reel to Reel happened, it gave us, as I said, an excuse to go out and kind of further the touring. And it was a really good live album, and it was a live album that kind of brought really the first two albums together in a lot of people's heads. So I mean, I was in this state where I was kind of perpetually on tour. I had no home then. I had no home down in London. What I was doing was I was living in, I had occasional digs. But in reality, I was living with my girlfriend, who was called Kay, and I'd just be given the keys to the sweetie shop. I mean, it was, I was kind of Scots guy. What's 84? That made it 25, 26 year old. And I'd always wanted to be a singer. Suddenly I was a singer, and I was a singer in a band that was getting great reviews, and people are going like, this is going to be a really happening band. And I was living in Earl's Court and with her for a bit, and I lived in Victoria Road when we split. We split up like regularly, but I mean, she was like a major love of my life, and I was too young, I was too immature, and at the same time, I think, all the press that was kicking about, I was having a problem between who was Derek and who was Fish. There was this strange kind of schizophrenia thing starting to happen. And, it was like, I was trying to convince myself Fish was the guy on stage and Derek was the guy off it, which is a really kind of stupid thing to do, because what happens is you start to become confused about the personalities. And so I'm on the roads, I'm confused about who I am, I'm splitting up with my girlfriend who I'm completely heartbroken about, and there's a lot of drugs and alcohol involved at the same time. It was not a healthy environment. No?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not an unknown state for people who are becoming successful musicians to have this transitional period, is there, where kind of what you would call old or home-based relationships transfer, and you're kind of essentially you're having to leave those behind, you're having to leave those people behind and that way of life behind, and you're moving on to something else. And do you think there was a kind of an element in those mourning what you were leaving behind?
Yeah, I mean, I was unsure. I was really nervous. I mean, I was dealing with a lot of situations that I'd never dealt with before. And there is always that thing in the back of your head as a musician. I remember talking to Ian Mosley about this. It's like, we're going to get caught out one day. It's like, it's a bluff. And basically, what you're doing as a singer and stuff. It's like you're kidding on. And one day, it's like somebody's going to go and we've caught you, we've sussed you, right? And there was always that feeling about it, and it's like, everything's going so well, and everybody's writing up some great things. And on top of that, I mean, I was having to deal with a lot of relationships as well. That, I mean, I'm not talking about, an intimate sexual thing or a female relationship, but dealing with relationships in general, where you had these people who were suddenly appearing that were all your best friend, right? And we're here to help you, and we understand you. And so you were continually having to evaluate people on the balls of your feet, and you were getting into situations, you were being led into situations, you're gullible, you're immature, and at the same time you're kind of, wide-eyed and legless, and that, you're willing to take on board this kind of whole hedonistic kind of cavalcade of friends, And as I said, I mean, with Kay especially, I mean, Kay was, she was the person that Derek really wanted to marry, but she wasn't the person that Fish needed at that point in his career. And, from a professional standpoint, misplaced, there was the pressure on us to deliver the third album. Okay, you've done your kind of difficult second album, right? Because again, script had been written, long before the EMI contract. It's Fugazi, half of it was written before the EMI contract. but Misplaced was being written within the EMI contract. And we had to deliver. You know, we'd done well on script, we'd done well in Fugazi. Reel to Reel had done exactly what it was supposed to do, was consolidate the 2 albums and get us a further bridgehead into Europe. And we had to deliver the album. And the record company wanted a single. And that was the bottom line. They wanted the single. And we wanted to do a concept album. And because we were arrogant little munchkins. And I think, you know, we'd all been brought up on progressive rock. We'd all been brought up on this kind of, the dream of kind of doing our own Dark Side of the Moon or whatever, or whatever. And we wanted to do this, you know, let's write a concert album. And I mean, in reality, I mean, writing, putting the music together bit by bit by bit and joining all the bits together is a lot easier than sitting down and writing kind of 12 songs with bridges and choruses and things and keeping it all together. And it was lucky that, you know, Mark and Steve came up with a couple of really great themes. You know, there was like the Lavender theme come up, and, you know, which kind of hinged quite a few pieces of the album together. And after that, it was just joining the bits. And I had the lyrical idea. You know, it was that when we decided to do the concept, before we went in and started putting all the, before we started putting all the bits together in the rehearsal studio, I went through this, you know, this night in my house. I mean, it was a really strange night. I mean, I was, you know, Kay and I had split. By this time I'd bought a house in Aylesbury, so I had my own pad. And it was just me. And all the other guys went back to their wives and their girlfriends, and I was left on my own, you know. And it was really strange at the time. And you know, you come back and all you had left with the pub, and you went, you know, when you came off the road, you were away from the road crew, you were away from the circus, you know. And it used to get quite depressing, it was quite sad and lonely, which, you know, was like, you know, cue kind of esoteric abuse, so to speak. And somebody had sent me down some white lightning acid, and I hadn't done it for about 4 years or something, and it was like, and I thought, what are we going to do tonight? And I was in a bad frame of mind, and I remember I dropped half of it, and then cycled up to Steve Rothery's. Very stupid thing to do. And I got up to Steve's, and I remember he had this poor picture of Natasha Kinski on his wall with a big python and stuff. And we sat and watched this Natasha Kinski film. And then it was like, I really like, oh, that was the other bit. It was after I'd done it, I think it was about after an hour after I'd done it, I dropped the other half, that was the thing, I forgot. There was the other half. And I got up to Steve's and I went out of it. I mean, I went skydiving, and, you know, Steve drove me home. Well, see ya, bye. Took me home, thanks mate. And I thought, I just had this urge to write. I just felt, it was like one of the nights where you knew that someone was coming, you were giving birth kind of vibe. And it started to go a bit crazy, and I mean, it got a very strange electric kind of, very scary electric trip for a bit. And I remember I calmed myself down, but I had this picture called Padres Bay. It was done by this artist called Jerry Shore, I think his name was. And I just used to stare at it, and I just calmed myself down, and I started putting a record. And I remember putting on Incubus, and listen to the words Incubus. And again, you got to remember, I was going through this whole schizophrenic thing, the Derek Fish thing, and of course, when I used to do kind of, in the old days, when I used to do that kind of stuff, I never used to get visuals. It was all internal, it was all head seizure stuff. And I had the whole question and answer session came up over Derek and Fish, and I just started to write, and I started writing this book. And it was just kind of, you know, stream of consciousness writing. And there was a shape starting to come in, right? And just when, I mean, I did this whole bit when, I went up into the bath, and I was starting to freak out, and I was on my own. I didn't know anybody about it, I didn't know the neighbours, none like that. I just moved really into the pad about 2 months before. And I remember going up in the bath and going at the fetal position in the bath and lukewarm water and all sorts of weird stuff. And I remember coming downstairs, and it was like, whoa, something's happening. And I felt a presence behind me coming down the stairs in the room, and I knew it was a boy, and it was like I didn't need to turn around. I could kind of, like, you know, I just knew it was there. And that had happened before in Earl's Court, where Kay and I had an experience in Earl's Court. The same thing on a stairway, and this boy, and she actually saw the boy on the stairwell. And it just calmed the whole thing down. It was like all the heaviness, all that kind of the tension that was there up to that point just dissipated, and I just continued writing. And I wrote, and I remember I phoned up Steve Rother the next day and I said, I've got the idea for the concept. I've worked it out. Right? And through about the 15 or 20 pages that I wrote in freeform, there was about probably a third of the first side of the album was there in phrases that I had to basically edit and put together. And it was all, it took in a lot of things. I mean, it took in the K bit. I mean, the album. I mean, the reason the album works is because the theme is ageless, because it's about somebody who has been broken down and has got to rebuild himself, and he's got to refine a direction. He's got to refine himself, his core self. And in doing that, he goes back to his childhood and kind of reevaluates and starts to build from scratch again, up to the point where he's ready to launch himself back into life. I mean, you can find it in so many movies, so many books, And it was kind of that's where I hung my coat on,
And did you find that you were writing almost in the order that the story started to appear on the album?
A lot of it, yeah. I mean, there was, the obvious first section, Harold and the Safety of a Sailor Silk Kimono. I mean, I had this old silk dressing gown that belonged to my dad. It was like one of those kind of 1920s kind of, what do you call them? Smoking pajama outfits.
Yeah.
It was a weird thing, and I was wearing that. And so, the first section, yeah, and then it went back, and then it goes straight into Kaylee, and Kaylee was a kind of reminiscence about Kay, and it threw in a couple other things. There was about 2 or 3 different people. I mean, there was a girl called Leslie that I went out with in Gala Shields, and she was really the dancing and stilettos in the snow one. And whereas Kay was more the Moonwash College Halls. I mean, there was 2 or 3 girls, but all the same reason, because I was making this very selfish move on a career, and this was my destiny, and I had to do it, and I had to go out moving it, and I'm sorry, but you can't come along because there ain't enough room in the car, And then, the lavender stuff. I remember going into rehearsal rooms, and I said, well, it's about childhood, and I thought, well, why not use the nursery rhyme? And I used to sit through in this other room, and I'd be smoking. The band would be playing, doing their bits and trying to find their bits of music through one room, and I'd be sitting in another room, putting the lyrics together, and I'd go through and go like that, and I went through going like lavender, right? And they're all going, what? And I seem to remember this. It's like going through and saying like, let's try lavender, and Mark came up with a ding, 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 right? And it was like bang, and it was like we knew it. So, and then Kaylee, Steve had come up with the guitar riff and stuff. So things started to join together. And of course, you've got the whole Blue Angel section was a reprise of Lavender, and that was about being in Leon one night, and we'd be get completely out of it, and firing fireworks out the balcony of the hotel because it was near Bastille Day or something like that. And I'd ended up, in this kind of relationship with this person, and it was like, and she turned around and it was like, Jean-Thomas Tonquer. I said, what's that? I suppose that means she goes, I can hear your heart. Right? I was like, So there was a lot of kind of esotericism kind of flying about.
You're making a lot of connections, but I guess at that stage you'd already decided that going forward you're going to write about your own life, specifically.
Well, I'd always done that.
I know, but this sort of particular instance, did that ever raise concerns that you're going to write about people who are going to know who they are, and other people might find out who they are? And this kind of giving over.
No, because I knew. Kay and I had been splitting up at that point by about a year and a half or so. We're completely out of touch. And I always swore I never will reveal her identity. It's one of the things, she lives down in the South England somewhere, and she's got 5 kids, and she's happily married and stuff like that, and that's her life, And we met once, and so it happened, and it was really strange. And she'd never heard the album either, which was quite bizarre.
Did she presume you knew it was about her?
she'd never heard the album. Or except what's the I don't want to hear a fucking album that's written about a period that really upset me for. Oh.
She didn't even know she was going out with you.
Yeah, but I've always kept it. And I've never betrayed her identity.
Yeah.
You know, and she was the only one, and the same with Leslie. Nobody knows these people. And there's the Leon. There's no mentions. Some people that are involved in the album don't even know they're involved in the album.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, apart from Milo, who was John Milo, who was the drummer in Rage, who died in the car crash in
I want
Spain.
to come to that in a bit, but talking about the opening section now, where you've got Kaylee and Lavender, and then you cut to the section in Leon with what you call.
Well, there's the cut
Magdalene
first.
and-
There's the first stuff. You got Lavender, and then it goes. It's like it goes Lavender, which is kind of like you're sitting there in the beautiful park. And I used to do that. I used to go. I was such a this doggone romantic fool. I used to go walking in parks, and I'd be convinced that I'm going to meet somebody, and the person that I'm meant to meet is walking on this planet somewhere, and we are meant to meet up, and we're going to meet up somewhere, be it in a cafe, or be it in a thing. I'm going to meet the woman that I completely love, my ideal dream woman, my Dudley Moore 10, my kind of, my Helena Troy, whatever you want to call it. And it was like the park, and I used to go walking in parks thinking it's going to happen, and just see, and it didn't happen. And Lavender became very strong in Berlin, because I remember, the song was particularly poignant in Berlin. And I always think about walking around what was the old embassy section, which was where we filmed the Kaylee video, And ironically, just to do a backtrack on that, Kaylee being written about Kay, who was like the love of my life, and I end up meeting my wife, or my now ex-wife, my ex-wife she was a model, and she was the girl who played Kay in the video, and who I eventually married and had my daughter by. And so it's been lots of changes, but after Lavender it tracks back to Aylesbury, and that was there was a spider wanders aimlessly within the warmth of a shadow. That was back there. We were back in Tripsville then. We're back in the room, we're back in the kimono, we're back in like the inter-tour shite, and then from there it kind of flips into kind of going out and tour again. You could just about have had, it's like the Doors track. What was it? Texas, blah blah blah. Texas and the Big Beat. You could actually have the crowd kind of roar at the beginning of that bit where it goes into that kind of salsa rhythm thing, because that was kind of let's get out there again. And as soon as you went out there again, it was like you're back. I went back into the bit that we named after the movies, because that was what it felt like. You felt like you were living in your own movie. And it was Lost Weekend, Dreamland about the alcoholic. It was Blue Angel being about the, ironically, the Berlin hooker, and then into that kind of edge of things.
But what I was trying to get at was this transition from a kind of intentionally quite romantic opening with Kaylee and Lavender, the kind of person you were, to the point where you're in Leon with, as the lyric implies, like a prostitute.
Yeah.
You've gone with a prostitute.
Because I was trying to find it again.
It's actually quite shocking at that moment that you've gone from this intensely romantic opening into, okay, here's someone else entirely. This is something entirely different at that point.
Yeah, I think because that sense of loneliness, and because and there was the other thing, there was an intense sense of guilt, because I knew what I'd walked away from. And I had to do it. I knew what I was giving up, and it was a bit, the cliched, devil at the crossroads vibe, and yeah, and then again it was, when you left, once you left your little sanctuary, once you left your sanctuary and you got your back on the tour bus and you went out the road again, it was like, here we go, plunge into these stairs, I'm coming at you, 3D. And that was it. And I was back into it. And of course, it's impossible or nearly impossible, or practically impossible to find what you might call a fulfilling relationship, or something that's going to be a long-term relationship on the road. It's very, very hard. Therefore, what you're involved with are what I refer to the thing as collisions.
Did you ever think about censoring yourself?
No, there was no need to censor myself. I didn't feel. Talking about the drug stuff, it's not something I'm particularly proud of. It was something I did back then, you know. And you know, ironically, it came from something that wasn't a good trip. It wasn't a good thing. It was a soul-searing one, you know. And it was, you know, I've never done it since. I mean, it's, you know, I mean that was the last time I ever took the hallucinogenic. I mean, that was, you know, I mean, I didn't feel the need to censor because I mean, I think being Scottish, I mean, I've always kind of worn my heart on my sleeve anyway. I've always been an open writer. I'm somebody that comes out of a culture that believes that a problem shared is a problem halved. You know, I worked with a band who didn't believe like that. I worked with a band who were predominantly English and predominantly middle class English, right? And that was one of the reasons why we had problems because a lot of it, the communication within the band was exceedingly difficult at some points. I mean, you know, I've read, for example, you know, I read there was a book about Marillion and took the whole thing in from, you know, from where it was when I was in it right through to the near present day. And Steve said a couple of things in that book that I just went, what? And it was like, at the time he never mentioned them, and at the time they were particularly important. And it was obvious that from about 1982, 1983, he was harbouring some severe grudges against me that he never let come out. And you know, if that's where we built a relationship on, then our relationship must have been pretty shit right the way through. And I found that disturbing, and I actually found that a little bit sad, you know. But I mean, that's where I was. I mean, the band, when I did say I was going to call the track Kaylee, he said, no, can you call it someone else? I went, no. I said, it's not, it's what it's about. You know, our name wasn't Kaylee. I mean, I made the name of the L-E-I-G-H bit up. You know, her name was Lee, and it was a middle name, and it was a pet name that her father had for her, right? And I put the name together, and they're going, you can't use that because everybody knows it is. I said, you know who it is, you know, but a lot of other people don't. And I said, you know, I'm not going to call it Vanessa or something like that. And I'm glad I never. I'm really glad I never. And yeah, I did come out with a lot of stuff in that album that was personal. You know, yeah, I was sleeping about with hookers in Leon. You know, I was doing the same thing in Berlin when we were recording the album. I was a very fucked up person. I was fronting a band that was, you know, coming on the verge of greatness. I had virtually no personal life, no private life. I was in, as I said, I was working in what was really an alien environment. I mean, I was, you know, 20-odd year old, and I was suddenly living in West Berlin. You know, making an album.
This is the other sort of key part of the album, isn't it? The move to Berlin.
West Berlin was the perfect culture dish to make an album like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the reason we went there was because it was the cheapest studio EMI I could find, because we'd spent a fortune making Fugazi. And I mean, that was one of the reasons why Real to Real came out, was because we had to pay back the debt to EMI. And EMI said, well, we can't afford it, so to have a big studio budget and stuff like that. So it's like, we've got Hansa Studios, you can go and record there. And it was Chris Kimsey was put up for it. And I think a lot of the budget went on paying Chris Kimsey for doing the album. And so we ended up in this wee hotel. It was just round the corner from Hansa Studios. I mean, it was in a kind of U shape. And on one leg of the U was the hotel. The bottom of the U was the Berlin Wall, and the other side of the U was Hansa Studios. And it was still, you know, it was before, you know, this whole rebuilding program that's occurred since then. It's completely, I mean, I don't even recognise the area now. But it was, you know, it was the spring, it was kind of winter, it was bleak, it was West Berlin. I mean, you have to expect to walk around the corner and bump into Michael Caine, you know what I mean, or Richard Burton. I mean, it was the stuff of spies, and I loved it. I thrived on it. You know.
I mean, you talked about the kind of divorcing yourself. In one way, there was Derek who you were leaving behind, Fish who you were moving towards. Do you think there was an element of Fish that was a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy?
I mean, now, I mean, I look at it, and it was a very unhealthy time in my life, you know. And I think I used to kind of isolate this. Excuse me. I used to isolate this kind of Fish thing and go, well, that's what Fish does, and that's what Derek does. But in reality, it's all the same person. It's just a diamond. It just gets turned around. It's a different facet you see, you know. I mean, someone, you know, that I read about in, you know, in books further on in my life, you know, like Lover, Warrior, Magician, King. You know, the pyramidal shape of the male character and the male persona, etc., etc. You know, at the time, but you know, it was all the same guy, you know. But I mean, I was
Do you
just.
think there was an element of giving yourself permission to go off? I
think by declaring Fish, the cat, I set by declaring Fish a separate character, you invented a kind of a social mask, you know, in which you could, allow, or you could forgive certain excesses, you know, and because, you know, hey, I'm a rock and roll star and I'm in fucking Berlin and it's West Berlin and, like, you know, fuck it, it's what you do.
So you're playing a role.
That's what you guys roll about.
Yeah,
oh,
but,
listen, I've been reading magazines with Jim Morrison and stuff like that, and I go, this is what people do. This is what we're supposed to do.
Exactly. Do you think there was an element of this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to do it?
Keith Richards, Jim Morrison was like, I mean, people go about Gabriel and stuff. One thing I really didn't like about Genesis was the fact they were just so quiet, you know. And you know, like the Jim Morrison stuff. I mean, I loved all that stuff. I mean, you know, I was reading books about the Stones and like the Brian Jones stuff and things like that. And there was. You know, as I said, I was given the keys to the sweetie shop. You know, so does anybody else want them? You know.
I think this is one of the great, because of the kind of music William made, people still never expect the fact that they were, you know, it was one of the great rock and roll bands. I mean,
it was great. I mean, it was. I mean, all the guys. I mean, don't ever let anybody in that band, right, try and make out that it was moi that was like the only kind of cheerleader in that band. I was only the point leader on certain nights. There were other people in that band that were just as capable of me and going to the same places that I went to. And it's but most of those guys were kind of married and had their girlfriends, and they weren't quite as kind of. I was allowed to do it because I didn't have a relationship, you know. And it was like they used to come out with me and like go like, I mean, the big thing at the time was like, yeah, we're going out with Fish to play, and it was like, I used to love it, you know. And it's like, you know, it would be hypocritical of anybody to turn around and make out that it's like I was the only one that was involved with this kind of, you know, the excesses of the road, be it anywhere, you know. And and I saw. I mean, I came through it, and I saw. I mean, I'm a totally different person now to what I was back then. I mean, I go back to the album. I mean, you know. You come out of the Leon Hooker thing and stuff like that. I mean, there was a lot of very dark things going on, but nobody was hurt. You know, nobody was getting hurt. There was no violence. You know, it was like it was fun. You know, if there were any damages, they were paid for and they were limited. Most of it was just having a laugh, meeting people, and partying down with them, and sometimes sleeping with them, or like just getting out of it with them and talking. And it was great, and I loved it. But you know, again, go back to the album. It comes out of that section where it goes, you know, the habit, the windswept thumb, you know, being on the roads, and that, you know, that whole section is getting late for scribbling and scratching the paper, which went back to Aylesbury again. Yes. And when it goes back to that section, it goes back into finding the childhood, which is back to Edinburgh, and that was Heart of Lothian. I was born with a Heart of Lothian. And that's where you get that kind of, that whole area where you're kind of standing proud again and going like, yeah, it's me, I'm part of that. That's what I really am, you know? I'm part of that white boy crew that kicks about in Edinburgh, and we're going out and we're going to party hard. And then it's like, wow. And again, it could be the big Texas and the big beat, you know, the big roar of the crowd at the end of it. And I remember writing the next section, because that was done down in Spain. And it was very wall-like, as in Waters wall-like. And I remember doing this. We did this gig in Calpe down in Spain, and this festival, this big bowl, and people never bought tickets. They just stood round the bowl and watched into the perimeter, and there was hundreds of cops. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of cops. They were standing on the roofs of the buildings, around the stage, and all like that. And I was knackered. I was tired. I'd been on the road too long, and I remember going into the toilet, and I remember sitting in the toilet, actually writing exactly like the wall. And there was something clipped in my head about it. I went, bleh. And I remember writing The Man in the Mirror with Sad Eyes, you know, and that was it was the whole thing about and the man from the magazine wants another shot, they all curled up, and that was the press thing starting to come in. That was what it was like, you know. Yeah, come on, you look great, man. You look wasted. Let's go on another one. Yeah, you know? And it's and then it goes for there till like that's the gig over, and it's like bang, and you see it on stage tonight. I mean, the transformation between, you know, basically. What's used to be called the first and second side of the album. And it goes into the second bit, which is, you know, the Watering Hole, White Boys, that's Partyville, and it's like, wow, heartbeat goes up, bang.
Before we talk about that bit, just want to get a little tiny bit on how much the atmosphere of Berlin you think shaped the actual sound of the record.
Well, we were recording it in Ansett Studios, and Bowie had done the Heroes album there. So I mean, there was a, and you know, the main room we were recording in was the ballroom of the SS Officers Club. You know, I mean, like, how much more atmosphere you want?
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible. I know, you know, we only worked at night. I mean, we were totally vampirical. I mean, you know, some of the guys are coming during the day, but I mean, I'd say nearly 90% of my sessions were done after the hours of 10 o'clock and before the hours of 5 in the morning. You know?
Was that a deliberate choice, or was that just
That's when the bar's shut, you fool. It was no, it was. I think, you know, Steve and the guys used to like working during the day. I mean, we didn't, you know, we'd record some of the basic tracks together and put down the basics, you know. But everybody would do the solos and other bits and pieces kind of separately, and we'd go on and listen to each other. But I mean, you know, we tended to kind of leave each other to ourselves a lot of the time. I mean, we'd come in at night and nothing to do. But I mean, there was a bar downstairs, and it was run by this guy called Zigmar, and we used to play dice games and drink Mampa, which was this awful Berlin kind of shot. It's kind of like it's like a kind of liqueur thing. It's vile. The Berliners love it. And we used to just sit there and drink Mampa, and then, you know, go up and do the studio, and then, you know, people would come and visit us, and then we'd stay up late, and then we'd go back late, and then sometimes I'd go back round to the hotel, and then after that, I used to, you know, because we hadn't had any money. Actually, before we went out to Berlin, I was sent in on behalf of the band to the EMI accountant to say, look, we can't live on this. You can't live. Well, I think it was the opposite of something like, I think it was like £5 or £10 a day, right, to live off in Berlin, right, when it was a good old Deutschmark. And I said, look, we can't live on it. I says, you come out and live off this. So anyway, we got a raise. But it was never enough. And of course, I think I had a credit card at the time, so I used to, like, you know, I used to run myself in horrendously in a debt on my credit card. But there was nothing to do at night. I mean, you know, it wasn't like now where, you know, you got the Sony Centre and they show English films and stuff. There was nowhere showed English movies apart from the American bases, and we didn't go up there, right? I mean, I remember one night we all went in to see Metropolis, Fritz Langer's Metropolis, because it was a silent movie. And I remember it was like, we all walked in and we all got, in fact, it was a really funny story, because we went to some burger joint, and we'd only been in there about 3 or 4 days, and we went in and somebody recognised us, somebody says, Marillion, autograph. And we said, no, it was the first autograph we ever signed in Berlin. I think it was about the only one, because nobody knew us in Berlin, because it was an island unto itself, right? And I remember Pedro Alves got especially drunk at the time, and we were in the cinema, and Pete comes staggering down the aisle. Like, looks like a good one with this silent movie. Shut up. But it was wild. I mean, there was some really wild stuff going on there. I mean, you know, like, you could get away with murder there, because I mean, Berlin was an island. It was an island in the middle of Russian-controlled territory, right? And you would hear shots go off at night. You would hear helicopters, you know, going over their head at night and stuff. And you used to get rumours every now and again that the Russians were going to break through and stuff. You know, I mean, there was one time there was actually an American first lieutenant, I think it was about to go home, and he was taking photographs. And he was warned when he was on his. They used to send American units through to the other side. You know, just kind of like as a gesture. Yeah, you can come across and see what we're doing, and we'll send a unit across to see what you're doing. And this guy had come across. He was about to go back home, and he went in a little shed. He was taking photographs of the Russians, and the Russians said, "Stop it, or we will shoot." And they kept it to photographs. They shot him. Right. And it was all kind of hushed up at the time, because I mean, it was a major diplomatic incident. Everyone in Berlin knew about it, and it was like, they're going to come. This is it. It's all going to kick off, and there's, you know, the Americans are going to do something. It's all going to tanks away through the wall, and it was heavy. You know, I mean, but at the same time, there was this kind of, I mean, it's the same reason Bowie went there. I mean, there's this kind of beautiful, like I said, this hedonistic atmosphere that was kicking around. Totally decadent. I mean, I remember going out with the guys went to this Austrian bar called Excel's. There was a restaurant, beautiful little restaurant, and a woman that ran it. I mean, she was pretty, I reckon she was at 50 odds, but I mean, you could tell that this had been an absolute wonderful model of a woman, right? And I was sex personified. She ran the place, and we used to go there and eat roast beef We had this kind of German version of roast beef. And we got there one night and Mark dared me. We were all drinking Drambuis and all sorts of stuff. And Mark dared me to walk through the restaurant naked. So I went down to the toilets that were down below. I came up, stark bullet naked, and walked up and sat at the table. Right? And I won 400 Deutschmarks. It paid for my hooker bill that week. It was really funny. It was great. It was, in fact, I walked through the restaurant, stark naked, saying goodbye everybody, and everybody's like cheering. I mean, it wasn't this kind of like security get them out of there. It was like yeah, right. Walked out of the hotel, realised I'd left my belt in the hotel. Walked back, excuse me, I left my belt. I know the little gay waiters are all taking camera shots of me. So there's a bunch of photographs of me naked in an Austrian restaurant in Berlin. But that was what it was. I mean, you know, you were walking about the wall, you were walking about all these kind of really kind of dense, overgrown kind of gothic parks and stuff, and it just fueled the whole album. I mean, you know, it just, the drama was there. You know, Wim Wenders was kind of like, you know, making the movie as we were making the album kind of vibe, you know?
Yeah. And then it goes into the, as you say, the end of the start of what we would have called side 2.
Yeah.
Which is again a very, bang, right, this is us. This is kind of a bravado coming.
Yeah, it's a white boy out there in the open, you know, it's like bang, let's go for it, you know? And again, I mean, there's so many drug references within the album at that time, you know, I mean, because it was the 80s. I mean, it was everywhere, London, Berlin, you know, it was a lot of stuff was going on, but then it was a great time for making music. I mean, it was a really exciting time. I mean, people had budgets, you know, and people were excited about music. There wasn't the competition and stuff that there is today, you know. But I mean, you know, that whole second side when it launched into, you know, the Waterhole Espresso Bungle, which we named after, you know, Espresso Bungle because it was about Soho, and it was like, hey, I'm Cliff, I'm blah, and, you know, I'm the new Elvis. You know, it was that kind of vibe. It was like taking the mick out of that side of things, and then it kind of, and then you've got the come down. Right after that, you've got the, you know, when it goes.
Was this kind of subconscious or planned, the way that every time it does pick up like this, and you almost, you know, the fish character almost gets on top, but it's deflated almost immediately by the next bit of last.
Yeah, I mean, putting the light and shade was important to us on the album. I mean, the first side came together really quickly, and it felt very natural. The second side was a lot harder to build, a lot harder to put together. It took us a lot longer to shape it, and but I mean, this is why it worked as the concept album, because a lot of things fell naturally into place. You know, the lyrical concept fell naturally over a lot of where the music was. You know, we were writing it together. You know, I mean, I was going and saying like, you know, I'm trying to do this, and this is what I'm trying to do in this section, and they go like da-da-da. And we'd have a blackboard with loads of different bits in it, and they'd all have names like the Joni Mitchell bit or the Floyd bit or something like that, because it sounded slightly like those things rather than being rip-offs, something like that. And I'd go, yeah, well, yeah, that's we need that bit, and probably trying this bit onto that bit because I could do with this bit, right? And then they'd play it and they'd see if it would work together, and we'd run it through a couple of times, and then we'd work the length of the section out, and where are we going to go from there? And I always remember we had like, you know, a bucket full of slow 5 sections. We were always like sackfuls of slow 5s, like just that we couldn't find places for. But in the second side, I mean, you know, there is this weird thing that happens where, as you said, there's an up and there's a down, there's an up and there's a down, you know.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, I guess the kind of the shock on the first the bit that arrests you on the first side is the Leon part, and on the second side it seems to be the Milo part, when all of a sudden you have this kind of
the Milo part, I mean, it seems key in a way. I mean, I think when you get the Warhol section in, there's the next section, I love someone over lunatic, pretend you never meant that much to me, you know, numb, a valiant child, distance, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that bit is, again, it's Kay coming back in. It's just when you've gone through the Warhol or you've done the macho bit, then you go straight back into like, it didn't mean anything, you know? You didn't mean anything. It's like, you know, you didn't hurt me. I'm stronger than that. This is where I really am. Yeah. But in actual fact, you're not. It's not where you're at. Yeah. And then you go straight into like strung out below a necklace of carnival lights, and you know the passing strangers section where it becomes melancholy, right? And then, you know, you have lines like, you know, Lonely Piece of Action from Another Town. I mean, it was, again, it's just those continual shallow collisions on the road that were kind of, you know, this kind of ersatz romance that you're trying to find some sort of real loving, you know, but you weren't finding it. All you were doing was just, you know, there were sweeties, you know, and then it goes into Milo, and Milo happened when we were out on the road on it would be the Reel to Reel sessions when they took us out to North America, and Mark Kelly and I were in Toronto with Paul Lewis, who was our tour manager, and John Milo played in the band called Rage. He was a drummer in a band called Rage, amazing dude, right? And he was rock and roll personified. He was a real kind of Jim Morrison type drummer character. I mean, he was like, he had women for days. He knew. I mean, he had every chat. Like, he was a good-looking guy. I mean, and he went away on his honeymoon and got killed in a car crash with his girlfriend. And it was the irony was just horrific. But I was in Toronto and we were just about to start interviews, and Paul came into the room and just said, "Milo's dead." And I was like, "What? This is John's dead." And I was like, I just went, "Fuck." And John and I were really close. I used to talk to, he was like a kind of guru for me as well. I used to talk a lot to John about how do you deal with stuff, and suddenly I had to do all these interviews, and these people are coming and going, "Hi, how you doing?" Right? And I said, "Well," and I was really, really upset, right? And I was having to go like, "Excuse me, but like, I've just been told that a really good friend of mine's just died," you know. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Anyway, can you tell me about that? You know. And it disturbed me, and I got angry as well, you know, because it was, you know, just get on with it. The show must go on. Get on with it. And you weren't allowed that private space. I mean, I think, you know, if it had been, you know, somebody that was a major star on a major label, it would have been the record company saying, "Well, sorry, but you know, you can't do interviews today," you know. And in some ways, it was like, yeah, you got to get on with it, and you know. But it kind of threw me, and I went, "Is this what's going to happen?" You know. And it's like, you know, I mean, and in that lyric, because, you know, some of us go down in a blaze of obscurity, some of us go down, you know, the price infamy, etc., etc. And I just thought, you know, I was being dehumanized and depersonalized, and, you know, what have I given up to get here? Right?
Because this is the start of the revelatory of the album.
Yeah. And it was really, you know, what have I really given up? Four of it. I mean, you know, I have done the crossroads here, and it was scary at the same time. And that's when it goes, woof, and you're back in Aylesbury again. And you know, and then it was, you know, you're back in Aylesbury, and it was, you know, so many the collisions, and that's when the boy walks in the room. And then from there,
there's the other theme that's playing into that is the disappointment of what being a rock star is almost.
yeah.
You know, there's some of that.
When you strip the veneer away, you know, it's kind of ugly. I mean, but that's what you're doing. You're selling the dream to people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and you know, I was sold the dream, bought into it, and you know, it's like, wait a minute, this, you know, this like buying a used car. You know?
Yeah.
And then you suddenly find out that, you know, things do break down. And as I said, that night in Aylesbury, I mean, I think, you know, I did break down, and the whole album was basically rebuilding from that. And the next section that goes on from that is the War Widow and the Laundrette, which is the anger.
Yeah, just like that.
You know, and it's the anger, and it's like, wait a minute. Why am I fucking reveling in this self-pity shit when what I should be doing is going out and fighting again? And that's kind of like, you know, it's the kind of the first of the wake-up calls. Yeah. You know, I can't take anymore. You know, and should we say goodbye? You know, should have taught myself. You know, should have just like, you know, do the Morrison bit and just, you know, leave in the blaze of glory and let them fucking put question marks over me for it. It's like, duh. You know, that's not my style. And then it goes into what was the hardest section of the album to write, which was, you know,
because this is the section in the end that you kind of find.
I found direction. There is no childhood zen, and that was it. You know, you're always a child. You know, there's always that child in you that will kind of find wonder in things, and there's always a child that's got this kind of naive, simplistic kind of look on life, and it's beautiful. You can't lose that, because I think when you do, then you do become a jaded cynic, and that is when you do end up fucking just going, fuck it, I've had enough. You know, and I think it's important to keep some of those values that you had when you were younger, and try and keep some of the visions and some of the dreams that you did have, because you know they still can come true.
And this is the part that sort of completes the concept, doesn't it?
Yeah.
At what point of the writing did that?
Right at the end. I didn't know where it ended.
Right.
Because I was still in phase 3 in Berlin.
Yeah.
And that was it. You know, I'm writing. You know, I mean, remember I'd written the Aylesbury section before it, because the Aylesbury section was written after, you know, post-Real to Real tour, right? And then Misplaced, it kind of carries on, and you have these moments of clarity, and I don't mean in an alcohol or drug sense, but I mean, you have these moments of clarity as far as the vision went, where you went, yeah, that's where that section should go. But you know, I mean, the Wasted section wasn't written in Aylesbury. The Wasted section was written live. It was done as a jam at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. Me and Chris Kimsey in the officers' ballroom, right, and you know the XSS club, at 4 in the morning, whatever it was. Put the track on, and I went, whoa! It'd be incredible if we could retrace all the collisions, all the sparks, all the lives that were lived here. And that was referring to that room. And Chris said something happened on that tape. You know, I mean, someone just went, woof. And it was difficult, because I had to follow up with the next part, which was the breakthrough, which was, you know, the Tommy through the mirror bit. It was the, you know, the big enlightenment. It was, you know, the crossing of the door. It was, and it was hard. And actually, I didn't write that lyric until right at the end, when I was writing it on the wall, like I said, on the U. I was actually on the way for the hotel, and Chris said, you have to have it written today. We have to finish it today, right? And I'm writing this lyric on the wall, and it's the hardest lyric on the album is to sing, because it's the hardest one to remember because of the structure of it all, because the structure of it is different from the kind of singing, the kind of lyrical structure of the other parts of the album. And but I find it singing it now in 2005, I find it more relevant singing it now, and it makes more sense to me now than it did in 1985. You know? And but it's just worrying, because I mean, I'm sitting here in 2005, 20 years on, you know, and I mean, lyrically it makes as much sense to me, the album. I mean, it fits like, you know, an old jacket. I mean, it is like going in the attic and finding an old jacket you wore you know, when you were a kid, or when you were, you know, a teenager or in your 20s, and you put it on and it still fits and it looks great and it's back in style and it works, you know. And I mean, I'm sitting very comfortably singing Misplaced. I mean, maybe the drama that I've done, you know, the work that I've done as an actor's helped in that, you know, I find it easier to draw on certain things now than I used to. I mean, I am a man now. Back then I was a boy, you know. But I mean, I'm loving it. I mean, it's a great album. I'm really, really proud of it.
How much do you think, because I think people would be interested it was, in some ways, it was probably known as a concept album. It was a concept that was in progress. It was a concept you were living with as you were writing.
Yeah, it's a diary more than a
I
concept.
mean, how much did this idea that there's a lot of writers say their subconscious mind is so strong and small in their writing? How much of this do you think was in the back of your mind at the time? Suddenly it was coming out as key.
I think a lot. I mean, I think a lot of stuff. I mean, I work with cameras. I mean, my eyes work with cameras. I mean, you know, people go on about, you know, being, you know, an observationist. I mean, I'm always working and I see things that go like, well, that's really cool, that shape. Or like, I mean, I should have worked in cinema. I shouldn't be working, I should be working in cinema. And the thing was that, you know, I picked up a lot of stuff back then, and I think it did lie in the subconscious. And when it was triggered that night in Aylesbury, and when it started to go, the skeleton of it all, once the skeleton formed, it was easy to flesh it out. You know, and I still work like that. You know, I still wear my heart on my sleeve to a lot of degrees. I mean, even the last studio album, Field of Crows, had some stuff that was exceedingly personal on it. That had to do with relationships that I've been going through in the last 3-4 years. You know?
I guess the other thing we should talk about briefly is the record company reaction to it, and the fact that
They were shocked.
We've made you a concept.
They weren't happy with it. I mean, they weren't kind of. I see they were shocked. Maybe that's a bit too strong. They weren't happy with it. They didn't like the idea of us doing, like, when we said we're doing a concept album. It's like, wait a minute, there aren't going to be like songs within the album, are there? And their big concern was, is there going to be a single? And the first time they heard Kelly, they didn't like it. I mean, in all honesty, when they heard Kelly, they just went, no, we don't think that's the single, right? And we said, we think it is, and we all knew it was. Steve Rutherford and I knew it was for kick-off. And I used to send these guys across to Berlin to check out and see what we were doing, and they used to come across and like, we used to basically take them out and get them drunk and get them in the control room. Yeah, you want to hear it? And there was a couple of times when the guy fell asleep in the back room of the studio, and he got up and he said, "It's a great album." He says, "Yeah, it's a great album, isn't it?" Yeah. And then we delivered it, and they were a bit, and then it happened, and then Kaylee happened, and it changed all our lives. I mean, I think it made the band and destroyed the band simultaneously. You know?
You talked a little bit earlier about this coincidence or whatever of having a future wife in the video.
Yeah.
Of a song about your girlfriend. How did that actually? What was the chronology of that?
The chronology of what?
Well,
the chronology of like meeting her and
Did you actually meet her on the video shoot, or did you know her?
No, I knew her before, and that's something.
So was this?
Yeah.
Was this
No,
Warrior?
She worked as. No. My ex-wife was not a hooker.
No.
But,
I wasn't implying that.
No, that's all right, mate. Dang him.
The psychology of getting someone you thought was going to be important to you. And putting
No,
in
it was.
the
I
video
mean,
for
no.
that song.
I met Tammy through a friend of ours who was a jazz pianist who was a friend of Chris Kimsey's, right? And she came along, and I just went jink and fell in love. And I think some of the lines in the first side, like the parallel of you.
Yeah.
I mean, she actually looked like Kay. Which I mean, and it wasn't until recently, till I met Kay, I went, fuck me. Because Kay and I split up about a year and a half before I met Tammy. And I'd kind of forgotten about it in the string of things that occurred at that time. And of course I met up with her, and we were looking for somebody to play Kay in the video, right? And I was kind of going, well, we could use Tammy. The band was like, yeah, that's terrible, you can't do that, that's terrible. Right? Getting on their self-righteous little bloody podiums. So, you can't do that. Right? I said, why not? Right? And it was like, so we picked 3 models, right? One of them being Tammy. 3 models. And the other 2 models, one of them went down with some horrific virus on the night before the shoot, and the other one fell down the stairs and broke her ankle on the morning of the shoot. So a little boy was on the stairs, tripping them up, and we went and we pulled Tammy in, and Tammy came in and did it, and then we met, and then we kind of like, she was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. She was working as a waitress in this nightclub that we went to, and we kind of, I fell in love with her, and asked her to marry me on about a second date or something, being kind of the impulsive idiot that I am, right? Still believing that like it's her, and we got married in 1987 and separated in 2001, and had a daughter in 91. We're still good friends, but I mean.
Yeah, we just want to talk a little bit about the ongoing impact of the record and how it's played into the culture in a lot of ways. You were mentioning Will Smith has a show about it.
Yeah, which I did a bit in. I don't know if you know about that.
No.
Well, Will came up and we did this thing. He's got a show that's going out in, I think it starts in April next year, and he does the Mr. Sheldon show, and it's about his relationship with the album and how he was a huge Marillion fan. And he phoned me up and came up. We actually wrote and filmed this bit where I obviously played myself. We did this bit where he comes up, pretends to be a writer for Classic Rock magazine, believe it or not. And he ends up doing we write all these gags out the sign of the records and a load of other things. And I ended up chasing him out of the house with these big Japanese swords, right? And we had a great laugh doing it. And I was amazed, when we've all brought up the whole idea of it. And there are so many people that mention it. I mean, I remember being at Meedem and I went to a rave, and I didn't have any cigarettes and stuff on me. And I went to the toilet and there was these wee French guys who were about maybe so like kind of like, you know, doing all the poses and stuff, looking at me, obviously, you know, very suspiciously. And I went, like, "Is any of you, have you got smoke boys?" And they're going, "Duh," right? And I says, "It's okay." He says, "I'm no police." He says, "Chanteur Écossais," but the only words I know in French, I'm a Scottish singer, right? And they're going, "Chanteur." I went, "Yeah." He says, I go, "Quel group," right? I says, "It's a fish." They go, "Fish?" I says, "Yeah, fish, Marillion." They went, "Misplaced childhood," right? And they were going, "Misplaced childhood," and it was the guy started raving on about Misplaced childhood. They were only about 18 years old. But it's obvious, it's one of them come down albums, you know, it's like Dark Side of the Moon, it's like, you know, it's 3 a.m, it's a cold bottle of Chablis, it's a big doobie, it's like, you know, let's put it on. And I'm really proud to be part of making an album like that, you know, because that was the kind of album I always wanted to make. You know, I always wanted to make one of those albums that people sat down and put the needle on and did one side and took it off and immediately put the second side on, you know, and we did that, you know, and like I said, I'm really proud of it. I mean, you know, Marillion and myself, we put together a great album, but I think he destroyed us because of the success. You know, I think, you know, once when Misplaced came out, I mean, it just went into turbo, you know, and I mean, if we were losing ourselves in Berlin, if I was losing my privacy and losing my kind of, you know, that essential, you know, core. You know, and if I was losing that in Berlin, it was in the 85 to 86, it was being absolutely flamethrowed. I mean, it was, you know, the demands, you know, the acceleration of our careers from the point where Kaylee was released, you know, and of course it drove us into Clutching at Straws, and Clutching at Straws, you know, was an album that was basically about dealing with the success of Misplaced, you know, and but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to, you know, there's a lot of people that you wouldn't expect that turn around and go, "Yeah, I really like that album." I mean, it's surprising many people actually know it. And, you know, we know from doing these Return to Childhood shows, we've seen people that I've obviously never seen myself solo that are coming out because it's like their interest has been rekindled.
And I guess the other great legacy of the album is the name Kaylee, which is quite nice.
Which is quite strange when you've got 20-year-old girls coming up to you and asking for your autograph. You know? I think that would be the day that I would actually like, have myself sectioned. It's like, you know, I think it would be the saddest day of my life when I'm sitting on my own at a cocktail bar, like, "What's your name, darling?" Buy a drink. Yeah, it's worrying. It's